Welcome back to my kitchen. It's a very rainy day outside. We've been getting a lot of rain lately, so it's the perfect day to bake bread. And I have 2 big bags of wheat here. I was able to find wheat within 200 kilometers, so I bought 150 pounds of wheat. The 2 varieties that I got, one is a higher gluten variety and one is a lower gluten variety. This variety is supposed to be better for pizza crusts, something that doesn't need as much rise as a bread does. Pretty much this second bag is for breads and biscuits. The second variety that I have here has a lower gluten content. I talked to the farmer, which is pretty cool if you can actually visit with the farmer that grew the wheat. I love that. And he said this had been grown in a little bit of a poor quality soil, so they had done some testing on it and it has a lower gluten content, which means it is not as great for breads, but professional bakers prefer it for things such as biscuits, pizza crusts, and something that doesn't need as much of a rise as bread does. But for curiosity's sake, today I figured I would make 2 batches of bread, one with the high gluten wheat and one with the lower gluten. And both of these will be, I'll freshly mill them, bake them right in my kitchen today. And I know we will eat everything, even if it doesn't turn out as great, but I'm curious to see what will happen. I'm going to start off with the lower gluten content. The way they tested this was with a falling test. If you research that, you can find out what that is about. I'm going to start off with this. This didn't score quite as high on the falling test. It was just under 300, and this, the higher gluten content, looks like this. These are 2 different varieties, so they also look a little bit different because of that. But this one had a lower falling score on the falling test, which means the gluten isn't as strong. This one scored over 400. So bread flour usually has a higher protein content, usually around 12 to 14%. Cake and pastry flours are actually much lower in protein, around 7 to 9%. And it's interesting when you grow wheat, how the wheat is grown, what weather conditions were around during that time, that will actually change the protein content. Higher protein content usually means you get a better price for your wheat when you sell it, and lower is usually less. So every farmer always wants the highest quality of wheat possible. So if you tried to make a sourdough bread with pastry flour, it would collapse because the gluten network isn't strong enough. Choosing what flour, what wheat you want really depends on the texture you want in your final product. Stronger gluten is better for structure and chewiness, while weaker gluten is better for softness and tenderness. So I'm noticing the first difference. Now that I've mixed it for quite some time, it's a very sticky dough. This hasn't happened before. And if you know what a window pane is, we're not at window pane. It's starting to come together a little bit. I'm going to add a little bit more flour and see if it starts pulling together. Here's a little glimpse into my kitchen. Because it was such a rainy day, I decided I would make some dough for the kids to play with. edible dough. This wasn't Play-Doh, but we actually made a batch of, it's brown sugar cookie recipe that turned out really well. And I separated the dough into pieces and gave each one of the kids a piece to shape and form, and they had a lot of fun with it. So my first batch of bread was done. I like to give it a nice even shape before I let it rise, and then I started on with the next one. The first batch is done. This will rise for an hour, and then I will make these into loaves. I'm going to do about 8 loaves, 4 loaves of each. And the dough definitely has a different consistency than what I usually use, so I'm excited to see what the difference is in bread. It might not make that much of a difference, even if gluten content is a little bit lower. What I've been told is that all-purpose flour from the store is actually often higher gluten content mixed with lower gluten content, and that gives them the uniform all-purpose flour that we're used to. Working with freshly milled flour has been such a joy to me. It has a completely different feel than when baking with all-purpose flour. The freshly milled flour just feels so much more alive. All-purpose flour feels really inactive after working with this. Now, like usual, when you plan for things, you sometimes have to change your plans. I had full intentions of making 4 loaves each, but as I was preparing my pans, I realized I only have 6 loaf pans. Usually I don't make a double batch, but I decided I would still separate each batch into 4 portions and then just make buns from the last batch, and it worked great. Now, for some reason, the buns didn't turn out really well. They were very heavy. They didn't rise like they should, and definitely need to work on that recipe a little bit. I'm not exactly sure what went wrong because the breads turned out decent, but for the buns, they were just way too dense and hard. Alright guys, it's confirmed. So I am surprised at the difference that these 2 flours made. I did not expect such a noticeable difference. And this is the bread with the higher falling number. It is more round on the top. I should have let this rise a little bit longer. It would have given a nicer round top. But it's still different than the other one. This is the one with a lower falling number. And you can see it's quite flat. The dough actually used quite a bit more flour than the other one did, and it's still, I'll cut the bread yet and see what the crumb looks like. Immediately the crumbs look very similar, from the weaker content to the higher gluten content, but later on the weaker bread, the slices just wanted to fall apart. The bread did not want to hold structure as well. So at the end of the day, what wheat you use for your freshly milled breads and other baked stuff makes a difference. If you're having trouble with the texture, try a different wheat or learn how to mix the wheat really well. That also makes a difference. Thanks for coming along in my kitchen today. We had a fun day even though it was raining outside, and I'm glad you could join us.